Senator Moore.
Thank you, Mr President. Last week, the Australia Institute released a paper on everyday sexism, Australian women's experiences of street harassment. This particular survey was conducted last year, November, and looked at the issues of harassment against women in public places. The survey explored the experiences of women and also their feelings of safety on the streets and any changes in behaviour that they were caused by their fear or concern about the sexism. The data, Mr President, was actually extremely confronting. The survey showed that, and I'll just run through stats, 87% of Australian women have experienced at least one form of verbal or physical street harassment. Among those who had experienced street harassment, 56% of women were alone when they experienced this attack, and 3 in 4 women, 74%, were harassed by a man or a group of men. Majority of the women were under 18 when they first experienced this harassment, and disturbingly, 40% of Australian women involved in this survey didn't feel safe when walking alone at night in an area where they live, their familiar place. They didn't feel safe walking to their own homes. And 87% of women have taken at least one action to ensure their own personal safety in the last 12 months, talking to their friends, looking at ways that they can feel safer. Mr President, it is extraordinarily confronting to hear the real experiences of women, not just through the survey, but also in an accompanying paper, which is the Everyday Sexism Project, which is a website which catalogues instances of sexism experienced by women in Australia on a day-to-day basis. Women actually contact the website and explain what's happened to them. First-person street harassment experiences from the Everyday Sexism Project were used in the paper that was published last week, along with the stats from the survey, to give a snapshot of a really disturbing element of our society. And, Mr President, this particular paper was done in the context of an ongoing discussion about increasing violence and attitudes to violence against women in our society. We know that since 1995, the National Community Attitudes Towards Violence Against Women survey has been tracking changes in attitudes to violence against women. 3 key survey dates: 1995, 2009 and 2013. Over that time, concern over women's safety in the community has declined, and the most recent survey found that since 1995, there has been a decrease in people who agree that violence is perpetrated mainly by men. Between 2009 and 2013, there was a decrease in those who recognise that women are more likely than men to suffer physical harm and fear as a result of the violence. Between 2009 and 2013, fewer people agreed that violence against women was common. So in that kind of environment, it's important to actually stop and look at what's happening now, what women are saying is occurring to them, and how that's forcing them to feel fear and to make changes in their own lives. I was particularly concerned by some of the experience in the Everyday Sexism Project. When you match that with the responses that we've heard that showed that 87% of Australian women have experienced a form of verbal or physical street harassment, when you hear what women are prepared to say that concerned them. And one of the contributions is from a woman who was walking home at night on a relatively busy street in a busy place, and from a passing car, a couple of young men yelled, "I'm going to rape you." They didn't come back, and I made it home safely, but I was alone and it frightened me. That kind of experience actually is not a one-off occasion. The kind of fear and concern and sometimes real anger that causes you affects your well-being, affects how you sleep, and also has some impact on your own sense of self-worth. And that is just not appropriate. It never has been, it is not now, and it certainly is not into the future. And it's not actually just for women at certain ages. There was an experience of a woman who was actually popping across going out from work and crossing the street to get her lunch, and another man in a bright yellow car decided to yell out particularly rude comments to her, a 40-year-old mother in broad daylight. She was wearing her work clothes and he was driving, so she didn't think he was drunk. Not that that would have been an excuse, but somehow you'd think in the middle of the day someone who would feel that they needed to do that would have some excuse for their behaviour. Also, most disturbingly, it's not just the verbal comments. I mean, I think in the survey it became clear that so many people, so many women have experienced lewd comments, whistles, inappropriate comments, but there is actually a more violent process that has been that was exposed during this survey. One of the particular concerns was the feeling of being stalked or followed, or your road or your passage blocked when you are feeling alone and vulnerable. And another thing from the Sexism Project is said that a young woman was on the train with some friends when she noticed that there was a man behind her just staring at her. I didn't know what to do. I ignored it because I thought it would go away. But then this man followed her from the train and followed her down her road towards her home. Again, Mr. President, this is something that causes fear and alarm, and most particularly makes you feel unsafe. In this environment, it's important that women can have an opportunity to talk about their experiences, to share that, and to ensure that the messages they are giving are listened to effectively, and that there is a sense that we know as a community that this is wrong. It's not a joke. It is not something that should just be shrugged off. I think I'm becoming, as I'm getting older, Mr. President, more offended by people telling me I should actually have a sense of humour about these things. I don't think it's funny. I really don't think it's funny that women are feeling unsafe, and that I don't think that we should be expected as a community to think this is something that we should accept or we should actually support. It is important when you read the survey that you understand that there is a response, there can be a response, and that we have an opportunity to actually give support. Very concerningly, one of the things that did come out in the survey, that so many of the people who were feeling that they could talk about the process by contacting the website or by sharing through their survey were still very young and at school, and they were already experiencing this fear and attack, which can have a number of responses. People can actually make that statement that they are not going to put up with it, that they do know it's inappropriate, and that they will be able to move forward and ensure that they say no and make this statement clearly in their community. Or, Mr. President, very worryingly, we have cases of people who were traumatised by the experience, do not change their social habits, and do not feel as though they are able to be themselves in public, and then begin questioning their own worth, and seemingly whether in fact it was something about them that attracted this attention or caused the hurt. Mr. President, it's important that we actually acknowledge surveys like the Australia Institute, and that we learn from them, and we have the reinforcement mechanisms in our community, in our schools, to say that this is not appropriate. And this is not just for women, it's for men as well. Behaviours can be learnt and behaviours can be unlearnt. What we need is to independently survey the attitudes, independently survey the information, and then have the strength to say no, and not be diverted by people just saying, oh, you shouldn't worry about that, it's just a bit of fun. Mr. President, it's not a bit of fun. People have every right to feel safe. They should feel safe, and I believe that as we continue to go down the ongoing discussions about the issue, when we look at the next National Community Attitudes Towards Violence Against Women survey, we should be able to question these results that say that violence is wrong, and that there should be an acknowledgement that we should not accept that it should be common.
Thank you, Senator Moore.